let's just talk a little bit about polls and polling. Because
I like polls, they're good people, winged hussars, good plumbers, good taxi drivers.
Yeah, terrible history. Terrible, very, very sad history.
It is, actually. Isn't it?
Polls. No, I'm talking about polling, P-O-L-L, not the people, not the great and noble people from Poland. So, yeah, just talk about polls a bit, because like everything else in our world, it seems now that it's been completely corrupted. And you have to be extremely careful where something you could have kind of taken for granted just a few years back. Now, you have to be extremely careful what you're looking at. And I guess that is the world we're living in, some sort of post-truth world or some sort of truth-augmented world where I happen to think, I hope I'm not being massively arrogant here, but having studied history, it puts me in good stead, because when you study history, you have to look at the source first and foremost. Before you really dig into what's being said, look at who the historian is, or the source, and have a look at them first, who they are, where they're coming from, what biases they might have. And once you've taken all that into account, then look at what they're saying.
Yeah.
And only then really can you start to even hope to be getting at what's really happening or what you're really being presented with. Now, hopefully a lot of people, most of our audience, I'm sure, do that on a daily basis now with their news intake, right? You have to do that with the news. You can't just take what the mainstream corporate media news tell you, or even what we're telling you, because
of course,
we're biased, but we're quite open about it. What we're partisan and biased about.
The reason why our company exists is that we present you what we think, but we don't try and dress it up as here's objective reality. You know, it's basically here's our opinion on something, and it's up to you to basically judge us,
right? Yeah.
And sort of make a character judgment on us specifically, the person presenting the segment.
Yeah.
Which makes it easier because you're not having to judge an entire media organisation, which might be faceless. You're just having to judge one person or a couple of people, which makes it a lot easier to assess whether it's valid or not, really, doesn't it?
We're coming from the right side of the aisle, at least centrists. Some of us are sensible centrists, and some of us are more right-leaning than that. But we're sort of open about it. You can take it or leave it. Sometimes you see coping leftists in our comments saying, you guys are no different, when we have a go at the biased mainstream media. They're like, you guys are no different. Yeah, we know different.
Well, we are
but
different.
At least we're being open about it. At least we're being
open
honest
about it. We're not saying that we have the truth. We don't say, hang on a minute, that's disinformation.
We're not the arbiters of objective truth. We're not claiming to be that.
Speak for yourselves. I am.
Except for Stelios. He knows
He's
everything.
Immaculate at all times. And this sort of now extends beyond just the news, fake news. It extends to polls and polling.
Yeah.
That now I think you have to be now extremely careful with any poll that you see, and actually have a look at who is the poll, who's it been done by, what were their criteria, who owns the company, even
polls don't release themselves.
All this sort of stuff.
There are a couple of things to say here. First of which is that polls have a significant effect on election results.
Can do.
And therefore there is an incentive in place to fiddle the numbers. And there are ways of doing that via the methodology that should be visible to people who know about this stuff. And I'm a loser that learnt this stuff at university. And I know all about sort of research methodology, particularly the stuff used in polling isn't that complicated, and therefore you can normally see it. And a lot of the time the people carrying out polling for these companies aren't particularly good at this sort of thing. And sometimes they do just make mistakes because they're often failed academics. And so they tend not to be that great anyway. But sometimes there can be decisions made in, say, sampling or in their methodology that will almost certainly bias the results, but not in a way that you can put down to malpractice, just an accident, but in ways in which you can say, well, this has shaped the result in a very deliberate way, except you can tell that because no one would make this mistake unintentionally.
So there's all sorts of things. I'd like to go into all sorts of details about how and why some polls can be inaccurate. But then also there's a whole nother beast of just deliberately putting out false polls. Just that are almost entirely fictional. Right? And we're also in that world. I think that's what we didn't have at least as much of a few years back, where people just sort of fairly openly, fairly nakedly, just put out a completely false poll. And just, at least for a while, it's swallowed by some people, and that's enough to move the needle, and that's all they ever wanted anyway. So, for example, here's one thing. ABC, stroke Ipsos, put out a poll saying, if you're only listening to this, Harris is on 52% and Trump's on 46%. I guess that's nationwide.
Who's going to believe that?
Well, it turns out that quite quickly it was debunked. Quite quickly it was shown that they, to be as kind as possible, were being partisan about how they'd done the poll in the first place.
Well, it makes for good propaganda, doesn't it? Because it gets presented as being objective, just like, here is what people are inclined to vote for, and people vote tactically, don't they? It might change how people vote. Maybe they're voting with the majority. You know, there is a psychological effect whereby people don't want to be in a minority group, and there are multiple layers to that. But just even within a certain group identity, you don't want to be in the minority group by definition because it's disadvantageous. You want to be in the majority group, and by signalling these sorts of things, these potential undecideds that are swayed by such sort of trivial things as that could be significant.
I would believe that if the sample was basically the Biden-Harris administration.
Right, yeah, her actual team. They only polled her team.
Yes.
Right, exactly. But that's a classic thing. There's a million and one ways you can skew this stuff if you want to. Right, just who you ask. Also, famously, loads of people lie when they're asked in the street or on a poll or anything. They say what they think the person at the other end of the phone or whatever would like to hear.
Well, normally
loads of people do that.
The bias in political polling is leftward, and so people normally report being more left-wing when asked for polling than they actually are in terms of both, you know, their voting intentions and just their values more generally. And that's a consistent trend known to political science. It's pretty well established, in fact.
Lots and lots of people, when they actually get into the voting booth, both ways, both left and right, do differently to what they've told all their friends and family. Yeah. Quite often that's the thing.
Also in dating this happens, but this is a bit, you know. No, it usually happens. A lot of people are, when asked, they are saying that they're attracted to a completely different kind of personality than the one they're actually attracted to.
Yeah, when I am on a date, I say, I'm a very successful banker. But really, no, I'm joking. I don't do that.
I've got a collection of Ferraris.
But I took the bus here today, yeah.
Like our audience quite often say they want white pills and then never click on them when we do them.
Yeah, so, that's true. That's true.
Well, I just had a pop at our own audience. Yeah. Not a good idea. Sorry, guys. I'm going to do a white pill next week. I actually am. I'm going to click on it when I do it. I'm going to talk about space with Dan and going to Mars. King Elon taking us back to the moon and Mars. Anyway, talk back to polling. It seems now we're in a sort of some sort of augmented truth age, where now polling is a battlefield. But they have been wrong. I mean, for example, a lot of the polls said that the Brexit, the Remainers were going to win easily. They didn't happen. If anyone remembers 2016, it was a 99% probability Hillary was going to win. Yeah. Like, all of them were saying that, or nearly all of them. Not all of them. You know, like Ann Coulter came out early and said Trump was going to win, if you remember that. And there was one or two polls that seemed to be quite close to reality, but nearly all of them, certainly all the corporate mainstream media, the morning of the vote before it was shown who'd actually won, it was Hillary 99% certain to win. It's just wrong, just complete partisan stuff. There's lots of examples. I remember, I was quite young, but I remember when John Major narrowly beat Neil Kinnock in 1992, and I remember then, even though I was a kid, all the news saying there's no way Kinnock can lose. Yeah. It's a complete slam dunk. No? I saw Peter Hitchens not too long ago talking about similar stuff from the 60s or the 70s, doing similar things. Polls can totally be not just wrong, but way off. So you've got to be...
You've got to be very, very careful with how you conduct them, because you're taking what ultimately is a very, very small sample of something that could well also change from the time you take the poll until the day of the ballot. And there are so many factors that influence people's voting intentions that it's almost impossible to account for all of them. So they're sort of setting up to do a futile task in the first place.
Classic thing is how you frame the question. Are you more likely to, for example, I'm massively exaggerating this, but they'll say like, are you more or less likely to vote for the lovely Kamala Harris or the evil Donald Trump? Why don't you give us your answer?
Ooh, the evil one, please.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, okay, if we go to the next tab there, I don't know who will click it for me, Samson. There you go. So this is just straight up super fake.
Super fake.
Super fake, yes. Fake
Is that,
news, okay?
Is that the Rick James song, like a discount version of it?
Uber fake, mega fake. But for a while, look, over 250,000 or 330,000 views on something that was utterly fake. And that will have moved the needle a tiny bit, right? It would have done. But look, you can see 89% of veterans and only not for Harris and only 9% for Trump. It's comically, it's almost, pretty much a lot, well, laughable.
Wounded vets, 96% in favour of Kamala Harris. Is that wounded in the head?
Yeah, wounded vets. It's particularly, well, funny, not funny, funny, crazy. Yeah. Because Kamala Harris was on record as, likening January 6th to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. One of the most disgusting things I've ever seen a politician say. And Trump, who's very pro-military. I think he loves the military love him, sort of a thing. One of the greatest militaries. Everyone says it's the greatest military in the world.
It's just fake news.
Yeah.
And also they publish it not to just make
News.
a veridical claim.
But Fox News, isn't that not right? Fox News actually went with it, at least for a while.
No, this isn't a real poll. It's fake data presented as a Fox News poll.
I see. Oh, right, okay.
So it's
still shared by 330,000 people.
Yeah, I think there are people, that is showing large accounts asking whether it's real. It's like, I don't know. I saw someone shared it on Facebook. Either way, it'll pee them off. Which is kind of the point. People know that it might not be legit, and they share it anyway if it shows stuff that
confirms their bias.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's funny. I see people use the exact same layout and font of a Guardian page. And put whatever they want in it and ascribe it to somebody. It's completely fake.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bit
Quite
funny.
Often that's for satire purposes.
Oh yeah, completely for satire.
And it's pretty transparent.
Yeah.
It's not like this where it's actually trying to pass off a poll as being legitimate.
But still, not less plausible than the actual content of Guardian.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the best ones of those fakes are when it's close to what someone like Owen Jones or Diane Abbott would actually say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when people Photoshop a picture to make the person look fatter, but only a little bit fatter, right? Not ridiculously, right? I see Paddy Pimlet say that. They Photoshop him to look a bit heavier. And he says, that's really annoying. Because when they make him look obese, then it's obviously...
It's an issue of lightning. How lightning works.
Okay, so if we go to the next one, it's from the Mail Online. I think this is, much more accurate. We're starting to get at least closer to reality. Is that it looks like it will actually be quite close, because I would have thought that Trump would be this far out, would be polling and go on to win landslides in nearly every state.
Yeah. Well,
like she
Bidenomics was the fact that Biden attached his name to the economy alone should be enough to lose Kamala the election.
Well, I would have thought she'll get the places that are going to go Democrat regardless of almost anything, like California, or maybe even, is it like Washington State and Oregon? I think maybe not, but certainly California. Lots of places on the East Coast as well.
New York State, England area, all of that around there is blue,
and like DC and stuff. So I would have thought that all the polls would show, and it would go on to actually play out in reality, that Trump would get 40 states or something, easily win. But it looks like perhaps that's not going to be the case. It will be closer. I still predict Trump would win because Kamala's such a car crash. She's so unlikable, right? I mean, I've got my biases. Again, I'm not pretending I haven't.
I just think...
it seems most people dislike her.
Yeah. I think that this is probably going to be a very unpredictable election. I think that knowing what will happen and how things play out is very, very difficult.
Depends how much, if at all, the Democrats fortify their vote.
That's fine.
Okay. And so there are certain swing states where historically they've always been close. And again, they will probably be close again. Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada. Not some of the biggest states. Nevada, I know, only gets, 4 or 6 electoral votes or something. But still, they all count. It absolutely all counts, especially, obviously, if it's going to be close. I don't think there's many in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and stuff, or even Arizona. Nevada and Arizona are giant states in terms of land area, but they're fairly not all that densely populated. So, largely desert and stuff. So, we'll see how it goes. But it looks like, according to different places, all different polls, it looks like maybe Harris is ahead in some places. If we go to the next link, here's a website that just shows loads and loads of different polls. And if you can see on the right-hand side, red is obviously pro-Harris. Sorry, blue is Harris, red is Trump. And if you just, at a glance, a lot of them are, more than half are showing blue. Well, a lot of these are the double-ups. Only the top of this is, the top ones here are sort of the most. And a lot of them do seem to be showing Harris. Harris in the lead in all sorts of places. There's this graph here I thought was interesting because it also shows the point at which Biden was cooed. I was going to say quit, when he was sort of asked to quit by God knows who. Yeah, when somebody else decided his political career was just over now. It shows that the polling seems to suggest, if you can believe it, that Harris has now got a lead on Trump. So it's interesting. I really did think if, the polls were even close to being honest or real, that Trump would just be sort of like this graph before here, just consistently ahead. And it's just a question of by how much. Whereas it seems they have swapped here.
I also wouldn't trust real clear politics, to be honest. However, I do think that Harris would be more popular than Biden because he was sort of publicly exposed as a corpse, but then also that was only in turn to put Harris as the candidate. And so I still think that normal people are going to see what Harris has done and that she's a lunatic and part of the old man regime that ruined the economy. And I don't think that she's going to be overtaking on Trump, who has precedent now to show that he made America energy independent. He didn't start any foreign wars. He didn't behave like a dictator. It's not really going to work in the same way. So I think that this polling should certainly be taken with a massive pinch of salt.
Definitely. And it is going to be interesting to watch this after the election. Remember you could do a segment after the election if Trump wins. I think he's going to win personally. That's my personal bet. But and if he wins, it would be good to collect all the polling that shows Kamala Harris taking a lead and just.
Well, I would have thought so. This is the main thrust of this segment, is that I wanted to say that I just sort of don't believe it. I don't want to fall into the same pitfall as last time when they had to release the Kraken to try and find out to what extent if any cheating had gone on. But these polls, I just don't trust them. I mean, if you remember last time, how sort of hardly anyone was turning out to Biden rallies. Biden didn't turn up to many rallies himself. Sort of the cliche was that he stayed in his basement and things. And the popular swell of support for Trump seemed absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the same goes for Kamala, because presidential elections, even more than general elections in the UK, is a bit like a popularity contest. A lot of it is about the top person on the ticket and whether you like them or not, whether you feel like you trust them or not. It's much, much more than a general election in Great Britain, right? And obviously Trump is a Marmite type figure, You either love him or hate him, sort of a thing. If
Very
anyone,
British reference for American
anyone
politics.
doesn't know what that means, you either really like him or you're sort of a never Trumper till your dying breath. But Kamala is sort of fairly, it seems, fairly universally disliked. She's obviously obnoxious. Within moments of hearing her speak, nearly always she comes across as horrible and annoying and obnoxious. And her political career has shown that she's a failure when it comes to winning popularity contests, right? She shouldn't have been on the Biden ticket in the first place. They parachuted her on there so they could have a woman of colour. No one in the Democrat Party wanted her.
What is interesting is that she, if I can remember correctly, she was the least popular among the Democrats.
Yeah.
And no Democrat wanted to jump in. If they thought they were going to win the election, why wouldn't they jump in?
Right. So if she does beat Trump this November, I would be surprised.
Yeah.
I would be surprised, but stranger things have happened. Not allowed to say anything beyond that without getting in trouble ourselves, right?
That's right, yeah.
But I would be surprised. Okay, and I've got one last link. I also need to very quickly say to you all before we finish this segment that we do have merch, Islander-themed merch on our merch store, the Islander magazine. Great magazine, couple of great articles from my good self in there.
I think your article was good.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I didn't pay Stelios to say that.
Yeah.
There's some good writers in there. There's Roeg Nationalist, Morgoth, quite a few people. And
Luca.
Who?
Luca Johnson.
Oh, yeah, Luca Johnson's was excellent.
Writing about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And we've got Islander-themed merch on our store, which is going to be taken down in a week or so. So if you want that, the window of opportunity is shrinking by the moment.
T-shirts, mugs, posters. I really like the T-shirts personally. Posters also look good. We've got one in the office.
Okay, so, and just to finish up then, I've got one last... Oh, no, that was the last link.
That was it, yeah.
So that is it.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Calvin's series. Here in this episode, he had Nick Tanconi, the interim leader of UKIP, and Speaker Bob from Speaker's Corner. And if you want to see everything else that we're putting out, you can also follow us on our Twitter account, where we always post links to it. Thank you very much, and goodbye.